Hello and welcome. Welcome to my channel where we talk about North Germanic paganism, lore and folklore from various parts of Europe as these bits and pieces of lore and folklore come across from various sources, old sources, new sources, but this is also the place where I share my own gnosis as well. And today we're going to talk about runes. Here is another episode in the Rune Tidbits series. This is episode 11. I would suggest to look at episode 1 because what we're going to discuss today is an extension or adds another layer of explanation, clarification of some things that have been already discussed in that first episode. Namely, today I would like to investigate a little bit or give my opinion on the question whether is there anything more to runes beyond their being just letters within an alphabet? Is there any quality? Is there anything that makes the runes suitable for us to consult in divination or to apply in magic or for any other purposes aside from writing? And before giving a yes, no kind of answer, I would like to give you my perspective on this. What are my beliefs? Because those are bound to color everything else, everything that I would say or do or create. So I'm an animist, which means that I believe that the world that we live in is filled with people, and people and personhood do not refer to humans alone. So I think of tree people and people who are ancient rocks and people who are four-legged and people who have wings. I'm not suggesting that all of these that I named people communicate in the same way as humans do. I do not suggest that they feel or see the world in the same way as humans do, because I have no way to know how do they actually feel or how do they actually see the world. I'm a human. I'm not a rock. I'm not a bird. I'm not a fox. So nevertheless, I do believe that personhood extends beyond the human condition. And this is the reason why I like treating everything and everyone around me with due respect and engage in conversation in ways that are, so to speak, suitable for the type of person and personhood that I'm encountering. I would sit and meditate by a rock, and I would sit and meditate by a tree and communicate with it in ways that are different than I would communicate with another fellow human. So the interaction would be a little bit different. Nevertheless, I still consider those other than human people still people. Back to runes. From an animistic perspective, when I'm consulting runes, my set of runes, I'm thinking of it as that set. I'm thinking of it as consulting another person or group of people, if I'm thinking of each rune as an individual with a voice and with something to share. So I go there in the process of engaging with the runes and interact with them as persons, as I said, beings who possess an anima, a sort of spirit, energy of their own. Now, I'll put a pin on that because I'll come back to it in a second. Runes are letters. there is no doubt that their letters, they evolved as a writing script, and I'm talking about the Elder Futhark specifically right now. They evolved from a previous script at the confluence of Latin alphabet and other influences from other parts of the European continent. It was a time when the Romans were pushing up north and west. So from the contact between Germanic tribes and the Romans, knowledge blended and scripts emerged in the Nordic parts of Europe, in the same way as the Romans had their own Latin script already into place. So those scripts continue to evolve and refine, distill themselves into the runic alphabets. And I'm saying alphabets because there's more than one. By the time we have, so it's Proto-Norse, this is way before the Viking Age. Proto-Norse, Elder Futhark, the 24 runes, which is probably the most popular used for divination today. That was used to record the Proto-Norse. So don't go around saying that you heard from me, Daniel Asfar Hedrin Simina, that Elder Futhark was used by the Vikings, because I am not even suggesting such a thing. That is inaccurate. So by the Viking Age, the Elder Futhark narrowed down to only 16 characters, and it starts acquiring different traits depending on, so the language tended to acquire characteristics depending on the region. So toward the end of the Viking Age, we're assisting at different language differentiation. So little by little, the Elder Futhark becomes the younger Futhark, with variations for the Danish Futhark and the Norwegian Futhark. And then in what is England today, the Anglo-Saxon Futhark. Just brief overview. And these alphabets were, beyond any shade of doubt, used primarily for writing. But there are poems. Speaking about them, please go and see episode 1 for a detailed talk on this. The runes are described in poems, and what's described in the poems goes beyond, like A is for apple, B is for whatever book. They are described as in terms of things that were very relevant to the worldview of the time, and the description given in the rune poems are rather complex. So it's beyond, in my opinion, and other people's opinion, this is beyond having simple mnemonics to remember the alphabet. It would have probably been much simpler to just memorize the letters than to go on and memorize the poems with their sophisticated scheme and rhyme and verse making technique. So there's also evidence. There is circumstantial, but from bits and pieces of lore and folklore and stories that reached us from long ago, we hear about runes being used in magic. Now, of course, to write a magic formula, you would use letters, and the letters available at the time were runes. So to write a magic formula or whatever magic intent, you use runes. However, there are sequences of runes, like repetition of a single rune, that obviously that's the purpose there is not to record a sentence or a complex, complete charm, rather than one rune was understood to contain all the properties required in such a way that by inscribing it, the energy needed for something to manifest was actually translated to the object on which the rune was inscribed. And I'm having in mind the rune Tiwaz that is found inscribed on, if memory serves, on the hilt of a sword, on a helmet, and on the sword hilt was inscribed like 3 times in a row. Obviously, Tiwaz, 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 it's an invocation, call unto God Tyr, but also the rune is associated with protection and victory in battle. So inscribing that rune automatically acted like an invocation. So like shorthand for an invocation. You don't have to actually elaborate to write something like a whole text. You just use the rune and it conveys that meaning. Now here the question would be, okay, is this just the meaning, just like an encoded literal meaning, or there's more to it? And what makes me think of an answer comes from a different poem. I believe it's from an Anglo-Saxon magical medical manuscript. And in that poem, Isa, the rune Isa, which means ice, is called upon. So the fever is described because it speaks about a fever or disease that probably has fever associated with it as well. So the poem mentions Isa, 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 and this Isa is being given, called 3 times, and given to the wolf. The wolf is the personification of the fever in the poem. That Isa rune is given to the wolf to cool himself. It's Isa, 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 take the ice rune, wolf, cool yourself, wolf, something to that effect. So, yeah, there is that rune called upon, chanted by the person implementing the cure as means to deliver the cooling effect required by the situation in which that healer is trying to address a person who probably has a fever or inflammation of sorts. Otherwise, why the need for cooling? Why the need for Isa? So back to the premises of this discussion. Are the runes letters? Of course they are letters. Do they have energies or properties by themselves that makes them suitable for uses other than just plain writing? I think it depends. For example, if I'm going to take the English alphabet or any other alphabet, that alphabet automatically and by itself may not speak to me. And again, it speaks to me. It's not mandated that it's going to speak to every single person in the same way. We're individuals, and feelings, preferences can also be individual. So if I'm going to take the English alphabet, it's not going to inspire me to, just think of it in any magical or more profound way beyond letters that are very useful if I want to communicate in writing or read something. However, I may take the said alphabet and carve the letters onto bits and pieces. And I could make poems for each letter depending on how it sounds to me. What imagery, what feelings brings to my mind. I can make my own system of divination. It may not even be like all the letters. Maybe I have a preference for some of them and I get them and decide those are going to be my letters that I'm going to consult in divination because I feel I have this resonance with them. And at that point, the set of letters that I made and I put thought and my own energy into them become, in my humble opinion, awaken, become alive. Alive in the sense that there is a dialogue. The animistic perspective that I mentioned earlier kicks in. And I'm having now a dialogue with those symbols, letter symbols that I made, and with my new set of letters that I can use for divination. In my experience, and again, this is my experience, which maybe no one else's experience, when I'm working with my rune set, I see them as letters, of course, because that's what they are fundamentally. But I see them also as more than just letters. I think of the verses that describe them. I look at their shape. I meditate with them. I feel this pathway of communication. And this is what I believe other people have done with runes in the past, back to the lore and folklore and to the saga material, where we are told, we get to know about runes being carved on a whalebone to manifest healing for a young lady. I discussed the episodes, I believe in episode 9 or 10 in the Rune Tidbits. No, episode 9. So I don't believe that somebody can casually scribble something on an object, and that something, that inscription, becomes weighty enough, energetically weighty enough to carry on, carry through the intent. So it requires more than this. And when I think of runes like this, or when I am employing the runes in this way, I also charge them. They become carriers, but not like passive carriers. They become animated principles that also carry forward my intent. So do runes have their own energy? I think it depends very much on how every single person, individual, human person, relates to them, how it chooses to see them, because bottom line, you can make a divination set out of anything. It doesn't have to be runes. But when choosing runes, that set that's being employed, consulted in divination, becomes something special, is, if you will, is more than the sum of its parts, is more than just a bunch of whether crystals or bone or bits of wood with some lines inscribed on them that potentially can be read as letters. That rune set is more than just that. At that point, it's more than just an alphabet, at least for me. So I hope I didn't create more confusion than bringing on clarification on the topic of runes, and runes being not inanimate, inert objects, or but actually alive and vibrant symbols with whom everybody can establish a connection, a relationship, and have meaningful communications with them. So thank you very much for watching.